Association of Counties Executive Committee. I'm on the Executive Committee, and yes, I will bring up EMS. Steve, you and I have Child Support Services on Friday.
Yes.
At 2:30. On Saturday, the Calaveras Humane Society is having a function at Cedar Center. If any or all of you could show up. And the Angels Murphy's Rotary is having their annual shrimp feed.
Family Day at Calaveras Big Trees.
And what?
Family Day at Calaveras Big Trees.
And Family Day at Calaveras Big Trees, right. That's all happening. And something down in Copper, too. Okay. And it's a Miss Boyce.
Just want to let the board know that next week at 1:30 in the public that there will be a study session on the interoperable communications project that we are partners with Alpine County. So that will begin at 1:30. And as you know, we still do not have a state budget. Governor said last Friday that he thought perhaps we'd have a budget in the next 2 or 3 weeks, felt that they were getting closer. It depends on who you speak to at the legislature. The state controller has said without a state budget that the cash flow will become a significant issue in August and September, and without a balanced budget they may be forced to issue IOUs come late August, September. So keep urging your legislators to please get the budget resolved. We need a state budget in place to prevent more problems. That's it.
Mr. Jones.
Nothing.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute recess to get ready for our study session on on-site wastewater regulations. The meeting, please. This is a study session. The board cannot take formal action, but we can give direction to staff. I'm going to have staff give a presentation. I'll ask the board if they have any questions or comments. I will open it up to the public for any questions or comments and bring it back to the board for any final direction. Thank you. Mr. Moss.
Good morning, Brian Moss, Administrator of Environmental Management. I have Ron Marlin with me today. He's our on-site wastewater engineer representing the on-site wastewater department. And today what we're going to be discussing is the redraft of the Calaveras County on-site wastewater regulations. Moving forward, the regulations were actually last updated in 1994. The major revisions would have been in 92, but there was some changes made in 1994. So to say that they're a little bit out of date would be a little bit of an understatement. Since the last update, treatment technologies have changed dramatically, including pre-treatment designs. One of the things designs that the board may be aware of are the textile systems that have been going in the ground for the last many years as engineered systems. Those systems are close to other systems that are currently in the code, but quite frankly needed to be written into the current regulations so we can move forward. Policies that were written as addendums to the regulations from 1994, I should say relevant policies, have also been incorporated into the regulation package that's before the board today. You will also note that as in the 94 regulations, this revision actually includes 2 different volumes. Volume 1 is development standards, which has to do with development of parcels and parcel maps and subdivision maps and the like. Volume 2 addresses the design standards, and those design standards have to do with what's actually being placed in the ground, what's being approved to be put in the ground for wastewater effluent treatment. The package before you today is actually a culmination of input from staff, from engineers, some of which have joined us today, and I appreciate everybody that made the study session today, so thank you. Engineers are who we now call qualified professionals in the new code to be consistent with state guidelines. Realtors have had input on this. Water District, and of course, the Regional Water Quality Control Board spent quite a bit of time on it as well. This is actually the 5th draft that you're looking at today. That draft was actually reviewed in a July 16th, 2010 meeting, kind of a workshop, if you will, at the county library, where we met with people that were interested in commenting or had questions. And again, some of the qualified professionals and realtors were present in that meeting as well. We did do, we did make some minor changes at that time, but nothing too significant. Those changes have been included in the document before you today. Very importantly, the new regulations will incorporate new statewide standards by reference. Those statewide standards, of course, we've been hearing about for a number of years in the term of associated with Assembly Bill 885. Currently, those regulations are not moving forward. They're being reviewed, discussed, and they're going to take a very different approach than what was being proposed initially by the State Water Board, which is actually a very good thing for local jurisdictions like Calaveras County. However, again, those regulations aren't currently moving forward, and I will update the board as necessary when they do. Regarding these regulations, we're obviously changing more than just the name. Some of the more significant changes include incorporation of the new technologies that we see coming along. Attended a meeting up in Orville a couple of months ago, very interesting, on what they call aeration systems. And the National Sanitation Foundation was actually there, what we call NSF, and talking about how these systems work. We don't see too many of them in our county, but it's certainly something that we can look at with the incorporation of the proposed document. So the bottom line is, you're going to see, if you go through this document, you're going to see a lot of changes and definitions, clarifications, really, and really also document format and intent. We found as we went through this document several times that there were some items that were completely out of place or redundant or whatever it happened to be. So we spent a long time cleaning that up. I'm going to give you a few examples today. Obviously, my intent is not to go through the 71 pages of the document that's before you today. But
Thank you.
You're welcome. But just to give you some examples of changes. Definition, as an example. One of the definitions that we've never had in the past is affluent. Interestingly enough, I took the first part of this definition from the proposed AB 885 regulations, an example of where AB 885 regulations didn't go far enough, which is kind of the opposite of what we've been concerned about for the last several years. But essentially, it means wastewater discharge from an on-site wastewater treatment component or portion thereof. What we really concentrated on, and I contacted the state certified lab to assist me with this, constituents commonly found in effluent include but are not limited to total and fecal coliform. You heard that today in the presentation of the Colony River watershed. The problem with that is those are indicator organisms, yes, present in wastewater, but those aren't the only things that are present in wastewater, and those things can be present even if you don't have wastewater. So what we've done is we've expanded this to include items such as chloride, chlorine, foaming agents found in detergents like BAS, caffeine, pharmaceuticals, and sodium. That doesn't mean we're going to look for all of those things if we have a failing septic system. It just means that those are items that we can look for to confirm or deny the presence of effluent. Real quick story, I responded to a complaint in McCullough Hill several years ago about a sewer system failing in the middle of the road. I went out there and realized very quickly that's not what it was. But I grabbed a sample and I didn't look for coliform. I looked for chlorides. I looked for sodium. It was very clear after I took that sample to the lab that indeed what we were looking at was a spring. So you can see it works. It can work the opposite way as well, confirming that it's definitely not effluent as much as it can if indeed it is effluent. Definitions continued. On-site wastewater treatment systems used to be septic systems. Essentially just means an on-site wastewater treatment system is defined in the California Water Code. On-site wastewater treatment inspector, spent a lot of time on this definition. It means a person that's knowledgeable in the inspection of on-site wastewater treatment systems, holding a current inspector certification by what we call NOT and CAWA, National Association of Wastewater Transporters, and California's On-Site Wastewater Association. Many of our small businesses in the county carry those certifications, especially our septic pumpers. Okay? We want people that are going out and looking at systems. When you look at the regulations, who can say that a system is failing? Well, it can be somebody from staff, it can be our engineer, it can be or it can be a on-site wastewater treatment inspector as found in the community. We do have a septic pumper with us today, in fact, that had a lot of input on this definition. Moving off of definitions, because I think there's like 90 of them. General comments. This is something that actually Al Segal and I discussed a little bit over the last couple of days. On-site wastewater treatment system shall not be issued if a wastewater delivery system is within 200 feet distance from the residence, or when a wastewater district requires connection to a public sewer. Okay? This was a CCWD input. I want to say that this is something we've been implementing all along. Is that correct, Ron? Even without these regulations. Bottom line is this. What we're trying to do is make sure that we're not approving septic systems where we have the realm of influence of a wastewater district. I don't care if it's the City of Angels, or SASD, or CCWD.
SASD.
San Andreas
Thank you.
Sanitary District. Thank you. And it doesn't really matter. As an example of that, when the new school opened up on Pool Station Road a couple of years ago, I got a call from the superintendent who said, "We got a problem. We want to open up the school, but the San Andreas Sanitary District says that there's a moratorium in place. Can we put in a storage tank and have it pumped either daily or every other day, or what happens to be, until the moratorium is lifted?" And I said, "Well, absolutely." But the school district had to go to the sanitation district and get an okay to do that as well, because it fell within their realm of influence. So this is just clarification so that we're not overlapping into sanitary district's jurisdiction. Moving on, on-site wastewater treatment system permit requirements. Here's an example of a previous policy. And we've always called this the one-bedroom expansion policy. Is that right? Essentially what the code says is if you're expanding an existing gravity, what we mean by that, it's a standard system, it's not engineered. You're going to expand an existing system that would not otherwise meet the current code at the time of the proposed expansion. You must upgrade to meet the current regulations. Well, if we're in Rancho Calaveras, as an example, and we have a standard system that's been functioning fine for a number of years, and we go out there and they say, we want to add a bedroom, the option is, the code says, rip it out of the ground, start a new system. It needs to be engineered because that's an engineered area, and then because of the geology, not because of issues associated like what we deal with up in Arnold. And this allows actually us at the department level to grant an exception on a case-by-case basis. If the existing system is, number one, is found to be functioning adequately, obviously, it can't be failing. The addition is equivalent to not more than one bedroom, and the plumbing has been modified to include the addition and installation of low-flow fixtures. So, yes, there's going to be a cost to the property owner, but not the same cost as, let's say, going out and hiring an engineer to design a new system, abandoning the old one, and installing a new system. So it's actually a breakthrough for the public, and it's still protecting public health and safety because we don't have a failing septic system. But it's a very good policy, and therefore we brought it forward. Advanced treatment systems with pressure distribution. You know, this is an area when on-site wastewater came down to environmental management a couple of years ago where we were very limited. We were limited as to what constituted an advanced treatment system. And some of the code had addressed it, and specific systems and inadequately addressed it in others. Again, going back to the textile systems that we see so many of today, this code will allow for, we've made it very generic, and so that we're not putting ourselves in a corner or boxing ourselves in and say, oh, you can't put that kind of system in the ground, okay? Because the code doesn't allow it, or we have to change the code. And we'll talk a little bit more about changing the code here in a few minutes. But the bottom line is, this allows for recognized advanced treatment systems like intermittent sand filters, which are in the current code, or other supplemental treatment, whether it be the aerobic systems that we've talked about, or the textile systems, or any other kind of systems that we have what we call a pump and pressure dose distribution. So this really opens up the field a little bit more. So kind of reviewing this, I know I've covered a lot in just a few minutes, but really the new package is designed to be a living document and updated on an annual or biannual basis. That's very important because technologies in this field change very quickly. And to box ourselves in and just tell people if something works, but we're not going to consider it, doesn't make a lot of sense. Or if it's something that is considered experimental today, and we make them monitor it for 3 years, and we find it works, we want to move that from an experimental system into just a plain, what we call an engineered system. No more monitoring required. So what we're thinking is by adopting this by resolution of the board, as has been done in the past, we can make small changes as necessary. Now, I will be honest with you, before we make those changes, I would be taking the same process I've done with this document, even though it would be just a small piece. I would be running that by the regulated community, okay? Because they do this every day. They know their field well, and they know what works and they know what doesn't work. And quite frankly, without their assistance and their input, this wouldn't be the document that you have before you today. Obviously, on your document, you see changes have been highlighted and deletions are shown in the strikeout and strike-through format. For clarity, I believe there's one package left there for if anybody needs it. The new regulations, again, will incorporate new statewide standards by reference. I had to throw this in because this is part of the GIS program that we did. These are septic systems that the board has probably seen in the past, at least the map thereof, built from 2000 through 2004. It's interesting because, you know, a picture speaks 1,000 words. I'm saying that because you notice all the engineered systems down here. Engineered systems are in red. Your standard systems tend to be up in the West Point area. Arnold says that they're standards, but really what they are is they're standards that they're designed and by an engineer because of a moratorium. Is that correct, Ron? Yes. So even though they're showing yellow, they may be what we normally classify as a gravity-fed standard system, but this whole area is engineered. Okay? So what was happening is when this GIS layer was put together, we were looking at type rather than, you know, the moratorium area. But it does, again, speak as to what the geology is, what's underlying the systems. Ironically, in an area like this, where we have to have engineered systems because we have slow permeability, in other words, the leach field doesn't work very well. We have some perched water tables. It's the same area of the county where if you have an underground storage tank leak, like Highway 12 to 26 that we've dealt with, that's not necessarily a bad area to have an underground tank leak. It's not going to go very far. Yes, it's mixing with some water, but we can contain it and it's not going to go very far. Great areas for septic systems, for standard systems, where that water leaches very well through the soil, through the geology. It's not a good place to have an underground storage tank leak. because who knows how far our petroleum has gone. So, like I say, you know, when you start getting into some of these maps, you can kind of say, well, this is really bad for this, but it's good for something else, and vice versa here. So, as you know, environmental management and specifically environmental health really have overlapping programs that affect one another. Yes.
Could you go back to the other one?
Absolutely.
The ones that you show on there, you say of just the ones that have been built since 2000?
2000 to 2004 only.
Is that just, I mean, what about all those that came before?
We don't have that. We haven't.
You don't
put
have
that
those
data
mapped?
together.
Oh,
We don't
okay.
have those mapped. We need to reestablish a GIS program, and ultimately we want to do that. This data was taken from the building department files when on-site wastewater was upstairs, and we just plotted. These weren't singly GPS. We just plotted the data by assessor parcel number. But it did give us a good picture. And again, this is really just a snapshot of time. But kind of
That's
gives you an
okay.
idea.
That's
Is there any idea of the numbers applied to red and numbers applied to yellow?
I would have to, we actually do have that data. I don't have the attribute table attached to this presentation, so I can't tell you what it is. But when you look at this, you're building a GIS database. That's one of the powerful tools about the GIS database. You look at it and go, how many engineered systems do I have? What type of engineered systems are those? How many are intermittent sand filters? How many are pressure dose sand systems? You know, how many of them are textile systems? So, or the same thing can attribute to the standard systems, although they vary a little. You know, how big are they? Somebody put in 300 lineal feet of 3x3 trench versus somebody else that put in, we don't really prove these anymore, 100 lineal feet of triple depth systems, which becomes a very anaerobic environment. But I digress.
Yes, you did. Could you move forward? Thank you.
Anyway, with that, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Brian, if you could go back to that previous slide there. I know that you have limitations on the icons and stuff that you can use, but I just really have to kind of point out that if a person was trying to build a case for the abolition of on-site septic systems, you would come up with a slide like this where you have this big collection of paint or ink on the screen. Mm-hmm. I think that the reality, I mean, if you did this in a Google Earth and you showed the actual tributary area of the septic system, and you wouldn't even be able to see it. So I want to make sure that we aren't broadcasting to people that are in the audience or looking here that this is a graphic representation of anything. I mean, it's just a device that we're using for illustration. It's not.
You know, that's a very good point, and that is correct. And quite frankly, I do have other maps that show if you blow that area up, okay, and you look at it by parcels. And I think I've done presentations before the board, and you can see the septic system on a parcel. You're absolutely correct. This is a real broad spectrum. We can, with that program, the GIS program, we can still focus in on and break it down to parcel. And you're absolutely correct. Yes, they may be engineered systems, but it's not like they're overlapping one another. So, thank you.
And the other thing that in all fairness to Rancho Calaveras, is that you and I have been out on sites where the permeability of the soil is remarkably good.
Right.
It's not preponderant out there, but there certainly are places where these on-site systems are, they're perfectly appropriate for the site-specific conditions that we've been finding. So
absolutely, and it's interesting because you never know what you're going to find. When I did the inspection program in a neighboring county many years ago, and I had the Don Pedro district, which was basically greenstone and a rock, and greenstone is rock, but greenstone and another rock. And I'll never forget going out to a site, and I get onto the side of the hill, and there was like, I think probably 8 or 9 feet of soil, and I almost fell over. And I told the property owner, I said, I can give you a standard system on this site. I can't believe it. I cannot, and they didn't put that. I mean, it wasn't like somebody graded it. It was on the hillside, similar to what actually you and I looked at one day on a parcel split or Metro Calaveras. So you're absolutely correct. And that's why we go out on every site and do an inspection, because just because an area is generally engineered does not necessarily mean, you're not going to have the geology to support a standard system.
Thank you for that.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board at the moment? Steve?
I just have one question. There are a number of people from my district, and I know you've encountered this, that are interested in particular locations for composting toilets. And they ran into regulatory issues that we had nothing to accommodate that. Even if we inspected and approved the particular circumstance, there was no vehicle to do that. Do you anticipate altering that approach or not in this round?
Well, actually, I'm going to turn that question over to Ron, because he and I were kind of discussing that before. The code does allow for a temporary fix using those, but not a permanent fix. Ron, any comments on that?
Well, we're going to have to develop those standards with the building department as a whole, but it's kind of along the same lines as the separate systems, the gray water systems that's been mandated and passed last September.
Right.
We, to this day, have not developed anything, nor has the building department, nor has the state sent down any regulation or any direction on which way they want to proceed on it. They just wrote a law and said, you can do it now, but that's it. So we have not investigated that technology enough to actually utilize it at this point in time. We can use it on a temporary basis via regulations, but at this point in time, like I said, we'll have to do it in conjunction with the building and some other experts.
But this new approach to it would at least provide the flexibility that we could revise this as that came evident.
Exactly. That's what this is a living document.
Don't have to start all over again.
Well, and we don't want to start over. We want to be able to. This brings up to date a document that was woefully out of date, and so what our intent again is to keep it current. And if that means coming back once a year or once every 2 years, that's fine. It might be changing one section or two sections. Specifically, your question is actually addressed in part on the top of page 26, number 9. It talks about essentially containment systems, and they may be used not to exceed 1 year at this time.
All right, thanks.
I have one, but I'll wait. Is there any questions or comments from the public on this?
Al Segal, Taxpayer Association, back again. I'm really amazed at how good a job was done on this.
Al, that's 2 compliments you've given staff today.
You got some good people. That doesn't mean that everybody
They may
hires
expel
good.
you from the Taxpayers Association, Al. You better be careful. You check your temperature, please.
On a 100-point scale, this is like an 85, and that's really good. But let's talk about the other 15%, because we might be able to improve it slightly more. Okay, I wrote an email and had a response on some ideas, and apparently my suggestions were more in the area of policy, and you can't ask your employees to set policy at all. They can't do that. They got to follow your policy. So these remarks are probably directed more at you. So, copy of some additional wording I did for the first page, which is the purpose. I'll read it. It's not very long. I added some in red to what's already there, but didn't take anything out that was there. These rules and regulations are adopted pursuant to the most recent ordinance addressing wastewater disposal as adopted by the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors. Contained herein are prescriptive standards for the field evaluation, design, and construction of on-site wastewater treatment systems. The purpose of the rules and regulations is for preventing conditions of pollutions and nuisance, to preserve the quality of surface and groundwater, and to protect the public and safety of the citizens of Calaveras County. Okay, now took the period away and added, while recognizing the property owner's right to use their property, period. Now we go back to what's there. These regulations supersede all previous regulations and written policies and adopts by reference any state mandated law and/or regulation pertaining to design and installation of on-site wastewater storage systems, period. Then I added a sentence to that. In the event that other regulatory bodies mandate unreasonable requirements resulting in hardship, regulatory abuse, or loss of use of property, the county shall seek to protect the property owner's rights by urging repeal or correction of the problem mandates. And then I had another sentence. These regulations are for the above stated purposes only and are not intended to control or to discourage land use. Sometimes regulations can be used for purposes other than what the regulations are supposed to be used for. Now, in addition to that, Brian's response on that was that that's not good writing. It's not. You can't put that in a regulation. Basically. Okay. The points. Number one, expansion area should be 50%. In smaller parcels, providing soil support this. He indicated that this is being done. That essentially what, that in other words, we're not going to require 100% expansion area if the parcel doesn't really need to have that much land. If the soil percolation rates were lower, larger areas may be needed because more leach fields will be needed and more expansion area will be needed. So that makes sense. But if you have really good soils, the 50% expansion area seems to be adequate and should be uniform, providing the soils support that. Number two, forcing owners to hook up to expensive public systems should not be mandated. Delete the 200-foot requirement. Okay, I understand now that this 200-foot is kind of like the worms in this jar. They're connected to the water district and to maybe some state laws, maybe federal laws. There's more happening with that, and so if you're able to delete that, that would be good. And also while it would hurt the efficiencies of a public sewer system by not having everybody hook up to it, it would be an incentive to watch their costs because there is competition. People could have their own system if they wanted to. The public systems are very expensive. It's like $11,000 for a home. And then for a little, like a little rental, a little small home, it's almost $100 a month, $85 or $90 a month for water and sewer. And this is really breaking the back of people that want to provide rental housing and or just want to build homes. So you have to think about these costs. And I'm told that the reason for these costs is not the fact that it's a big bureaucracy. It's because of the mandated requirements from the state and federal government on water quality. Probably a level of quality that the district itself would not deem would be really desired by their customers. Here again, worms again. So if you can delete that 200 feet, that'd be great. The next one is, okay, this is a rough one. In our county, the county used a half acre as a template for septic systems. And like in where I live in Copper Cove, the minimum parcel size is a half acre to even have a septic system. And however, when I was living in Twainhart, the subdivision I was in, Lakewood Park, which had good soils, the minimum parcel size was a quarter acre minimum parcel size. Then we had more discussion about that, and it was suggested that we got to have that 1 acre minimum because of the area for the septic system. There's supposed to be 12,000 square feet put aside for a septic system. Okay, if you take a quarter acre, which is a quarter, you're talking about 13,000 square feet, you wouldn't have any room for a house. It's true that 12,000 square feet is really a mandate. If it's not, then that itself needs to be looked at. I'll give you an example. A leach field would be 75 foot per bedroom. 3-bedroom home would be 225 feet. And if you probably 10 feet wide would be enough for your leach area, but we could double that, make it 20 feet wide. You come up with 4,500 square feet. And if we add 50% more to that, multiplied by 150%, that's 6,700 square feet. Well, 6,700 square feet, that makes a quarter acre parcel just fine. Then that allows you to have reduce the cost of future homes, and it allows you still to have protection of the public. And the fact that it has been done in another county is indication that it does work. The question is, can you reduce that 12,000 square foot requirement or not? I'm not sure if you can, but it might be the worms back at work. Okay, remove the 1-year requirement for holding tank use when off-site disposal is needed. There are situations, compost toilets is another one, very good point, Steve, that can make a property usable and not harm the public. The worst case situation would be if the effluent or if the septic just needs to be pumped with a large holding tank, maybe once a month. There's cases that I know in Tuolumne County they do that, and that'd be the worst situation. But you can't put a 1-year period on that because you eliminate the use of the property. They got to set up only for emergencies. Can you pump up to a year? You just take the year off, and then if the system is if the soil is so bad you can't have an on-site septic system, then go ahead and let them pump if they want to pump. It's their expense. It allows the parcel to be usable. That's the main thing. Thank you for allowing me my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Segali. Is there any other questions or comments, please?
If I may, my name is Kit Rosefield. A little personal disclosure first. I'm a visually impaired person, so while eye contact is very important to me, it's not a reality anymore, so please feel my sincerity in my presentation. First, if I can just take a couple minutes to tell you who I am, then I'll get into why I'm here. I am an adjunct instructor at Columbia Community College as part of their new Water Resources Management program. Team teaching with 4 other instructors on a 4-track career path program. It's pretty exciting, but just to let you know that's happening. I'm the education coordinator for the California On-Site Wastewater Association, affectionately known as CAWA. I'm a trainer for the National Association of Wastewater Transporters, NOT, for whom I also serve as representative on the National Decentralized Wastewater Partnership. That's a group of 3 federal agencies and 14 national organizations focused on expanding the whole decentralized wastewater option and the viability. So with that said, I kind of want to tell you why I'm here. I understand there's been some debate over the certification requirements for septic inspectors, on-site wastewater treatment inspectors. The national program, the NOT inspector program, does require 6 contact hours every 2 years of continuing education. That program, our programs through CAWA and NOT, offer additional training for those contact hours that include the science of soils, system controls, the principles of plan review, installation of OATS, which has a National Environmental Health Association certification attached to it, and 2 levels of operation and maintenance. And that's a 4-day total program with 2 national certifications to it, introductory and advanced. And I mentioned that while the inspector program is an excellent start and will move your local practitioners towards a better understanding of on-site wastewater through these continuing education opportunities, you will soon be discussing, especially with the interest in composting toilets and gray water systems, the issues of management of these engineered technologies. Management, essentially operation and maintenance and verification that these technologies are working appropriately. While most of them do require an NSF International certification, which has a mandatory 2 to 3 year operation and maintenance contract, beyond that, it's totally up to the homeowner to maintain that contract. And I can assure you that with the sophistication of these technologies, without some level of ongoing management actually required, there are going to be issues. But the only issue is you will be revisiting this as a living document to add in the operation and maintenance and management requirements, possibly for even technologies such as composting toilets and gray water systems. So I'm here basically to let you know that the questions over the inspector program bring up the reality that it is going to better the practitioners in your jurisdiction. I think it's an excellent add. No doubt I have special interest in identifying myself. But on the other hand, it is going to set people up to take care of the future needs for management of your systems. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenfield. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, good morning. My name's Rosemary Wilson. I live in McCullamy Hill, and I'm back from England temporarily. I wanted to ask whether this document was primarily intended to clarify your working practices since 1994 to current, or whether there were important parts, and I realize this depends on exactly which parcel you're talking about, but whether there are wordings in here that would make it more or less difficult to get an engineered or a standard system approved for a currently undeveloped lot.
Actually, thank you for the question. This is actually designed to update, so that's the first issue. Secondly, it actually allows the qualified professionals to submit other possibilities and alternatives that weren't even considered before. So quite frankly, we're getting down to lots at this point in the foothill communities, not just Calaveras County, where we don't have very good soils.
Right.
So what we're trying to do is find ways, in other words, to, what can be approved, what will work, what will clean up the effluent before it hits the water table. Now, there's only one little water table in Calaveras County, and that's down in the west end. But kind of like this old depiction that you're looking at here, I mean, that's kind of the idea. Now, whether there's pre-treatment involved, which is a lot of it, or if it's standard, the goal is the same. If anything, this is to streamline what we currently have in place, which is quite frankly inadequate, and allows qualified professionals to submit designs, other alternative designs, and to actually also adopt what was being done by policy into code, therefore being codified the way it should be. So the bottom line is, no, this is not designed to make engineered systems not a reality. Quite to the contrary, it's designed to enhance and grasp the new technologies that have come along since 1994.
So the flow rates and distances quoted, stated, I'm looking here at 45, page 45, for, say, setback requirements. They have been the same, or the majority of them, the ones that are here without a strike through show no change.
Correct. You're absolutely correct about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Morning.
Could you just identify yourself?
Oh, sorry. Diane Keene, San Andreas. I was a little curious when I was reading through this, and I guess it was one of the definitions, is that we don't seem to be addressing gray water. Is this county not going to allow gray water?
No, it's actually the State Department of Housing and Community Development passed a law approximately a year ago allowing for gray water throughout California. You're correct. These regulations don't address gray water. Quite frankly, the state of California hasn't even come up with standards as to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So what we're doing, not only in Calaveras County, but statewide, is we're waiting for something from the state saying this is what is considered an adequate system. I will tell you that East Bay Mud, as an example, is building a green building down in Comanche, And as part of that, they're going to be doing a gray water system. We haven't seen it yet. We do know some basic aspects, as in the gray water must be so subsurface, you can't just put it in a trench and run it out to a tree kind of thing.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to seeing how these big ones submits to us, because there's no doubt it will be state of the art. But we're also waiting for the state to come through with some clarifications as to what they find acceptable. In other words, they wrote a law that said you can use gray water for agricultural use or whatever it happens to be, or for your gardening, but they didn't tell us what was acceptable for that. So, yes, we will consider gray water systems, but this document does not do that.
Do we have a time frame? Because obviously it's going to change some of the. If you allow the gray water, it's going to change some of the stuff. If you were having to put in a new system now, as far as the.
It really shouldn't change what's in here. The issue with the gray water system, you have to understand, is that if somebody comes in and they are putting in a new system, let's say it's an engineered system, they say, I want to break my gray water off separately from what we call black water. Okay? They could be doubling their costs. Now, that's not our business, but I mean, in fact, to do a gray water system, it needs to be separate from the black water system, and therefore, now you're increasing your costs. But that's not our job to say, you know, what that is. Our job is to say, you know, what's acceptable and what's not as far as design.
Okay, and one of the other questions that I sort of had is I noticed they took out the option for one bedroom, and part of why I'm asking is because, and I can't remember where I saw an affordable housing complex where they actually did a little village, and it was, I think it even won some awards, I can't remember where it was, where they built in this little village for under the affordable housing thing, is they put in, they built some one-bedroom cottages for singles and seniors, and then they had 2-bedroom units, and then they had 3-bedroom units. But you seem to have taken out the one-bedroom option. I'm curious as to why.
Ron, go ahead.
Well, probably the biggest reason is that one-bedrooms aren't really prevalent anywhere around here.
Agreed.
But and the initial cost is basically one more leash line. So what we went with was a minimum of 2-bedroom, which has been the standard since I've been here, actually since, well, 94 was okay, but in 7 years that I've been here, only 2 bedrooms are minimum that we've ever used.
Right.
Okay, and basically because there are no 1-bedrooms, other than maybe some real sparse areas in the county.
But we could leave that provision in there if you so chose.
It still allows for a 1-bedroom home, it just
Right.
needs a 2-bedroom system.
Yeah, it just means the size of the tank.
It doesn't.
Right.
Doesn't mean you can't put a one-bedroom house in.
No, I know. But the size of the tank would be smaller if it was a 1-bedroom.
By 2 gallons.
Yeah.
That's correct.
The cost would be different.
And then again, also in the industry, yeah, basically your minimum tank size is anymore 1,200 with the back of the tank. So
okay.
Almost,
Well,
it
just-
would be a special tank, and you probably end up paying as much or more for that anyway. Then
I just
Right, it would cost you
wanted
more
us to
for a
remain
smaller
flexible,
tank.
so if the cost was less and they were working on an affordable housing project, that we would be flexible and not do it. In fact, I think one of the other things that you mentioned, and I think it was on the page on the experimental sections, you said that you would consider them if you could come up with documentation in Calaveras County in order to approve it. I forgot exactly what the wording was, but I sat there and went, well, wait a minute. If we're talking about an experimental situation, I mean, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona have come up with a lot of technology that we might not have even adopted here. So it had something to do with the wording then, and you limited it to just Calaveras County. And I went, well, if we're talking about experimental systems, wouldn't you want to consider anything from any other state as long as the documentation was there to satisfy your premises that, yes, this system is valid and we can put it in as an experimental system. But I think the way you worded it, it said you had to come up with documentation for Calaveras County.
What you're thinking of is experimental versus a straight engineered
Right.
system. And what we're talking about experimental systems is you have to understand, anytime you're dealing with the on-site program, you're dealing with geology.
Right.
The geology in Texas, as the example you're giving, is not the same geology as you're working in the hard rocks up in Calaveras County. So what may work in Texas may not work in Calaveras County. So we're not saying we won't accept it. We're saying we'll accept it or look at it. If it looks like it's viable as submitted by a qualified professional,
Right.
for which we have several in the group here today, we will look at it, but we're going to ask for monitoring for
Right.
a period of 3 years. If it works, we can move it out of the experimental because we know it works in our geology and
And
it's
then-
all straight
and
into
then
the
it works.
system.
Okay. And any other thing you might want to take and do on page 10 under owner, since there are a lot of banks out there that own houses, you might want to add the word bank. It's not there, but they do own these houses now.
Thank you, Mr. Are there other comments?
I know I see 12 o'clock and I see Supervisor Tron ready to go to lunch, and I am too. So I will say real quick, I really appreciate the opportunity to be a partner in the development of this. I wasn't the particular staff for CCWD that worked on it, but I know that they had input. And Brian Moss has done a fantastic job. I did want to show just quickly, though, on that illustration, and I have heartburn every time I see it, because it shows it vertically, the effluent, percolating vertically downward. Soil stratifies over time, and it travels more horizontal than it does vertically, which it does because of gravity, but it travels more horizontally. And so I'd like to address just a little bit of what our friend Al Sigala had to say about competition within a wastewater district service area. The reality is there's a wastewater district service area because there's public facilities available. And even if you do allow septic tanks to go in within that service area, it's not going to increase competition. It just means the public wastewater service area is going to struggle along with a poor economy of scales. And I've worked with the State Water Board engineers. I hesitate to say what he said, but he said he's never met a septic tank that doesn't contaminate. The reality is nitrate is a very conservative ion, and it travels great distances. And, the obvious thing is that they are getting into our streams and waterways. I'm not going to suggest, however, we get rid of septic tanks. They have their place. But to suggest that we construct them within wastewater district service areas, I think is a mistake. But I do appreciate the opportunity to comment on this. Thank you.
Well, I want to point out also on this slide, this is you should have been subjected to the test of truth in advertising on this stuff here. Getting back to my other slide.
The disclosure here is this is the federal EPA slide.
This picture is used all the time, and I don't know who constructed it, but it's circulated widely, and it provides a
oversimplification.
Yes.
But I want to harken back to the time when I was building and putting in some septic systems and stuff. And the reality is that about 90, well, maybe close to 90% of the water that goes into your system, it goes upwards. I mean, it evaporates and goes through the soil upwards, not downwards. And that's a gross misrepresentation there. So.
Well, the State Water Board engineer said the best type of system is one that has a very shallow leach area that allows the natural evaporation and evapotranspiration of plants that will take up any of those nutrients. So that was...
And that's a really good point, because many of our systems, that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. It's not like the old days in Tuolumne County, where I worked as a septic inspector, and we were doing triple depth, which means they're like 6 or 7 foot deep trenches. And yes, you could get more. You shorten the length of the lines, okay? And so therefore, maybe a quarter acre, like Al was talking about, might be possible. I don't remember quarter acres, but that wasn't my area when I worked there. So the bottom line is You shorten up the lines and you make them deeper. The problem with that is it's an aerobic, i.e. without air system, doesn't work nearly as well. You can have this kind of situation a little bit more with that scenario versus what we try to do in our county, which is keep the systems close to the surface for exactly the reason that Supervisor Thomas was stating. We want to get that evaporation, and the evapotranspiration includes plants. As you'll see, those are actually defined in definitions, those terms. We do want that. The more evaporation we get out of the system, quite frankly, the better.
Is there anyone else who would like to say something, please?
My name's Robin Peters. I'm an engineer with Cal State Engineering. I started designing engineered septic systems in the late 70s and early 80s before there were any rules and regulations. And we had that crummy old ordinance. I still have a copy of the original ordinance, and we called those the Wild West days in Calaveras County, when almost anything, if you could dig it, you could put it in the ground. And I spent a lot of time in 1988, 89, 90, as the county began the process of abandoning the old ordinance and developing these new regulations. And it was an agonizing process, and there was a lot of angry folks in Calaveras County at the time that thought that the development of the new ordinance and development of these regulations would strip folks of property rights. And I think time has shown that really didn't happen, and the design community and the county worked together to develop new technologies that allowed development of these existing properties to move forward, notwithstanding the presence of regulation. And yes, we've used and abused these regulations since their development in 92 and then the revision in 94, and over the years they have become outdated. The need for policies to plug the holes and bridge the gaps in this set of regulations became obvious pretty quickly, and a number of policies, some written and some unwritten, were developed to fix the bugs in this thing. And so I'm pleased that the county's undertaken this project. It's no fun, but it does cause us all, county regulators and practitioners as well, to sort of take a deep breath and reassess what we've been doing for the last almost 20 years, and to make sure that what we're doing makes sense. And I think the process has been good for all of us, and I'm pleased to say that the conclusion is that, yeah, by and large, what we've been doing in Calaveras County is working, and it's working well, and this update of the regulations is welcome. Certainly by the design community, we've worked pretty hard with Brian and his staff to get these regulation revisions to a point where they make sense, and we're anxious to implement them. And I'd encourage the board to adopt what Brian's put together. There are a few sections of them that I'm not particularly fond of, but I understand why they're there, and we'll just have to work with them. So I think overall we're happy with the result, and I think Brian's to be commended, and Brian's staff. They've done a great job, and I think the board should embrace what he's done and move forward with it.